So this is the personal injury documentation for low impact soft tissue spinal injuries. So we want to pay attention to that in particular. We're not going to be talking about every personal injury under the sun. And that is really important because as chiropractors, we literally do see a very small niche of personal injury 80 to 90, 95% of the time. So there's no need to just cover everything and not focus on the 80 or 90% that we see every day. So when I go through this documentation, and by the way, that's also why we can be so precise and accurate with the documentation, is because I'm specifically talking about the low impact soft tissue spinal injury. So it's the spinal injury, low impact soft tissue, because there's a difference between a high impact, excuse me, we're going to see a lot more diagnostics added on. And there's going to be a difference with if we're not talking about a spinal injury. So we're really narrowing it down to what we see day in and day out as a chiropractor. So the diagnostic test factors relative to the low impact soft tissue spinal injury, especially at maximum medical improvement. So remember, all of these tests are important. And when we talk about this documentation, on one hand, we're going to be talking about the clinical side. Do not mix the clinical side with the legal side. So I'm going to be talking about both. We'll talk about the clinical side, and then also we'll talk about how it relates to the legal side. Now, when I say legal, I'm referring to the potential injury award. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, having said that, it's especially important to be paying attention to this at MMI, maximum medical improvement. So obviously, from a clinical standpoint, everything you find out in the initial exam is very important to the patient. The re-exams, MMI, all the clinical findings are obviously very important to the patient. Now, when it comes to the legal side, injury award, what matters most is, did the person end up with a permanent injury that's causing pain or restrictions with their activities of daily living? And for them to get to a permanent injury, they've had to reach MMI. So from the legal side, we're going to pay a lot of attention to MMI and the impairment rating relative to ADLs. So just be aware of that. And then the real reason we're going to focus on the soft tissue spinal injury is these car injury statistics from the Insurance Research Council. And that 87% of the car injuries are soft tissue. Now, when we say soft tissue, that's kind of a generic term, or what we're really going to be paying attention to is connective tissue. The connective tissue is going to be way more important than the soft tissue. And we'll go into making that distinction. But 87% of the cases are soft tissue injuries. So what does that mean? It means there's a lot of potential business. 32% are disc injuries. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means a lot from a marketing standpoint, in that only 1/3 of the injuries essentially have a disc. 2/3 of them do not. Now that becomes really important from a marketing standpoint for a chiropractor. And then 16% are nerve injuries, 10% are mild concussions, and 2% are fractures. So a couple of reasons we want to pay attention to the soft tissue spinal injuries. Number one, it's the largest by volume. Number two, chiropractors are pretty much the best providers for soft tissue spinal injuries, especially relative to the science of the 3 phases of healing, and especially in the repair phase of healing, where all 3 ranges require therapeutic protocol, all 3 ranges of motion, active, passive, and joint motion. And the most important motion that has the greatest impact clinically is the joint motion. And so this is why the chiropractor is so important. And there's no other profession that does that. So this is a major reason why the chiropractor is so important for the 3 phases of healing. And then the big reason from a marketing standpoint is there's no competition. There's not any particular healthcare provider that is the authority in the soft tissue spinal injury. Now, that's good and bad for the chiropractor. But the bad news is the disc injuries are pretty much the neurosurgeons and the orthopedic surgeons. They already own that category with authority. Attorneys don't think they need a chiropractors at all. As a matter of fact, it'd be very, very difficult to break in and overcome that authority. A lot of businesses have gone bankrupt trying to overcome the primary or the leader in the industry. And so we definitely don't want to go head to head against a neurosurgeon or an orthopedist when it comes to authority and credibility. Chiropractor will lose 10 times out of 10 unless the chiropractors developed a personal relationship with that one provider. But when it comes to just the professions at large, the orthopedic surgeon, orthopedist, neurologist, neurosurgeon, that's who has the authority with the disc. Now, same with the nerve injuries. It's the neurologist or neurosurgeon. Chiropractor's not going to beat them with authority in in what's called the marketplace. And same with mild concussion. I'm not going to have people going to chiropractors for mild concussion unless somehow they've had an experience or something unusual. But you're going to go to the neurosurgeon, neurologist, things like that, and definitely not fractures. So the orthopedist and the neurosurgeon own that category. So we have this category called the soft tissue spinal injury that, it's really big. It's affecting a lot of people. Chiropractic is the only healthcare that addresses all three phases of healing, and there's no other authority. Well, that's the great news. The bad news is when you're not an authority in an industry, in other words, they're not looking for you, then advertising and publicity doesn't work. So there's really good and bad news, but the bad news is really the good news because there's a tremendous amount of business and no competition. But you have to use educational sales for your marketing because that's the only type of marketing that helps to establish need and awareness when somebody doesn't have it. Advertising and publicity doesn't. So that's the great news about the good, the bad and good news about these injuries. So there's tremendous opportunity. I can't tell you how many attorneys I've talked to, and they just have stacks and stacks of low impact soft tissue spinal injuries, and they don't know what to do with them. And if they are by chance using a chiropractor, 95% of the time they've gotten really bad documentation. And this is another reason why the attorneys don't see chiropractors. Number one, they don't see chiropractors just like 92% of the population doesn't. It's for this very same reason that they're confused. All the mixed messaging totally violates the very first law in marketing. You actually have to be something to a specific market to actually own that market. And when you try to be everything to everybody, you become nothing to everybody. Well, that's chiropractic. Trying to claim they can pretty much do anything under the sun with this thing called a subluxation. And there's a very difference of whether it's real, how much it works or not versus marketing in reality. So they don't use it because they're confused, A. B, they generally haven't found any value. If they found value working with a chiropractor, they'd be looking for chiropractors to refer their case. They don't. And the number one reason they don't is most chiropractors don't know the documentation. And so they get stuck essentially with junk. That's what happens. And those are big, big deals. So they're confused. There's no perceived value because of the experiences they have had. There's no perceived need, but there's a huge market. So you have to know the documentation and the marketing, because if you, let's say you're good at educational sales and you know how to establish needs where they want your services, but then you don't know how to deliver the goods. You don't know the documentation. And so their injury awards stay at 2 to 1 or lower. Well, they can do that with, any average to below average chiropractor. They don't need anybody for that. So that's what we're going to be paying a lot of attention to. relative to these soft tissue units. So that's why it's a fantastic market. It's large. There's a tremendous need, not just for the patients and clinically, but also to support the patient. It's important that we support the patient. If they have a permanent problem, it's real important, you, the doctor, to be able to support that patient if indeed it does go to trial. That's a major factor. And so when you know the documentation, but you don't know the marketing, you don't know educational sales, you won't be able to get the business. So we got to know the documentation to be able to support the business we're going to create. And then we have to know the educational sales to be able to establish their need to where they actually feel they cannot do without you. And that's what educational sales does when you do it right. So tremendous opportunities here. And then there's not many chiropractors that, 80% of the chiropractors don't even do personal injury. And then the ones that do, 95% of them really have never learned documentation on how to document the personal injury case. And so there you have it. A clear example is a case that I was just hired as an expert witness. We didn't use that patient they went to the emergency room. They went to their medical doctor. They went to a chiropractor. They went to a pain management. We didn't use any of the chiropractor's notes. There was absolutely nothing in their notes we could use. And if we used anything, it would have been trouble. The notes were so bad, it would have caused problems. So we just totally left it out and hoping the defense attorney didn't bring them in, and thankfully he didn't. So this is why it's so big and such a huge opportunity. And of course, in the chiropractic industry, it's the largest exchange of time for money. So you're going to make the most money on a personal injury case versus any other type of case. And of course, that depends on what state you're in. But the lowest I've heard in all the states is maybe $2,500. In some of the other states that have better laws, it's an average of $7,000. And that I'm talking about for a low impact soft tissue spinal injury case. So you'll easily double or triple or quadruple, a cash patient or a Medicare patient or a major medical patient. So there's all these opportunities, but you do have to know documentation. You do have to know the basics of the market. And of course, we teach all that. So just wanted to share with you the opportunity here.